So I just helped run a furry convention, and I learned a lot. So we've talked about furry conventions on this channel before, and I'm sure many of you watching have had the chance to go to one, or even a bunch already. And I'm sure most of you who have attended these conventions have gone as a participant, someone who goes to the panels, parties, and dances, or simply hangs out with their friends. But if you're like me, you're always wondering how something as large and logistically complex as a furry convention actually works behind the scenes. It's something I've always wondered since I attended my first con back in 2021, and 3.5 years later, I finally got a chance to find out. So I spent 15 hours of my first weekend of the year to get a peek behind the curtain of how a furry convention runs, and well, here's what I found out. So in order to actually get a behind the scenes look at how a furry convention runs, I had to, well, find a way to actually get behind the scenes. Doing that meant setting up and managing a crucial part of the convention itself, or in other words, I had to sign up to be a volunteer. Now, in case you didn't know, most, if not all furry conventions are entirely run by volunteers. They're not employees of the con and are certainly not paid, though many cons do compensate their volunteers in other ways, as we'll get into in a little bit. But everything from setting up the signing to preparing all of the rooms for panels to configuring the audio and visuals for big events are all conducted by people freely giving up their time. Now, I've been wanting to volunteer at a furry convention for a while now, and it's for a couple of reasons that might resonate with you. First off, it's a fantastic way to give back to the community. Let's be honest here, I can't draw or dance or DJ, but I still have the urge to do something to give back to the community that I have benefited so greatly from. And besides scraping videos like these together, I really don't have a lot of other resources to use to give back to y'all directly. That being said, there is one resource that I'm sure most of us have that can be used to give back to this fandom in some way: our time. It's something that I had a little extra of this past weekend, and that's what I decided to give back to this fandom in exchange for helping out at a furry convention. Volunteering, especially at an event like a furry convention, is also a great way to simply do something different at a con for a change. Especially at conventions that you've attended often or don't have many friends attending with you, volunteering really shakes your time up at a con, in a good way. It definitely keeps you busy, but it still allows you to be social with con-goers as well as your other fellow volunteers, and most importantly, it prevents you from boredom because, trust me, when you're volunteering, there's always something for you to do. This is why I ended up choosing Anthro Northwest to take some time out of my weekend to help out. It's a moderately sized con that I've gone to multiple times already as an attendee, and it's in the same city that I already live in, so there's no need to venture out and explore. And I only knew a few of my friends who were actually going, so I thought, what the heck? Why not help out this year? And help out I did, or at least it felt like I did. In a lot of cases, when you go to sign up to help out at a con, you can actually rank which departments you want to most help out with. This ranges from security to AV to just general setup and teardown, which is nice because it means that you'll most likely spend your time doing something that you know you can help out with. And while there were a couple of categories that I could have chosen, I decided to keep it simple and choose a role that I knew I would be good at: convention registration. I knew I would be able to help out there because it's basically a customer service role, something that I've done before in the past. I was tasked to organize the badges for those who registered for the convention, help retrieve those badges for those who pre-regged and were just ready to get their convention started, and even helped answer some frequently asked questions from people who occasionally got a little lost during their time at the con. And I actually had a lot of fun doing it. One of the shifts that I worked included the opening shift on Thursday, where the bulk of the pre-registrants came to pick up their badges, and the constant movement back and forth between the front desk and the badge bins, all while making small talk with everyone excited to get their weekend started, was pretty fulfilling. It was especially fun to talk to the parents of younger ones who were curious about what this all was, and giving them quick breakdowns of what furry is and how we celebrated at conventions was pretty amusing. Along with that, I was personally impressed with how many of the parents specifically were cautiously optimistic about the whole thing, instead of their view of the fandom being stained by negative, incorrect stereotypes. Needless to say, I had a blast helping everyone get their convention started, and that experience alone gave me quite a different worldview about how furry conventions run in general. But after combining that experience with talking with some of the staff and other more experienced volunteers, it truly became clear to me that running a furry convention successfully for an entire weekend is nothing short of a Herculean effort. If you take a step back and look at furry conventions at a high level, it may not seem like there's all that much that's needed to get one going, especially for a con like Anther Northwest, which isn't breaking any attendance records anytime soon. But even for a con that's on the smaller side like A&W, the amount of people power that's needed to make everything happen is quite extraordinary. First of all, it's not like the space for the con at the hotel that we were in could be set up overnight. 5 floors had to be arranged and configured for the various events at the convention, an effort that started a week before the con even began. I wasn't a part of that team, but some volunteers were spending their New Year's Eve and day setting up for this convention, and things were still being worked on right up until the hour that we started letting pre-regged attendees pick up their badges. And it's not like conventions are set it and forget it either. All throughout the weekend, things were being moved and reconfigured to help accommodate different events. For example, the main ballroom was transformed 4 different times in the same afternoon on Saturday to accommodate panels, a banquet, a dance competition, and the nightly raves. So yeah, while you're all running around going to panels, shopping at the dealer's den, and hanging out with your friends, there are scores of people working behind the scenes to help get everything set up and changed throughout the weekend. And everyone is doing this, all of this effort is being put into something like this, simply because these people volunteering their time really do care about your enjoyment at a convention. I know I mentioned earlier that at least the job that I had throughout the weekend looked a lot like a customer service job on the surface, and honestly, if you really abstract a convention out, the volunteers are similarly serving all of you attending. But unlike a lot of real-world customer service representatives, everyone that is working is truly passionate about what they do and wants to ensure that everyone is enjoying their weekend immersed in this fandom. And especially working with them this past weekend, trust me, they all get it. The volunteers understand how impactful these weekends are for so many of you out there, and how for many people in this fandom, this may be the one time throughout the entire year when they can see their friends, temporarily escape the real world, and most importantly, just be themselves. This is why they are truly trying their best to ensure that a convention is a safe space for everyone, and while treating them with respect should be the bare minimum, a quick thank you to any volunteer you encounter at a con will really help make their day that much better. And even though the volunteers at any given convention are doing all that they can, probably the biggest takeaway that I had with working with them was that there's always room for more help. Furry conventions are unique because they are so dynamic in everything that goes on, so much so that no furry convention is the same as any other one, and no one year at the same con is the same as any of their prior years. This means that there's always things that come up throughout the weekend that the con wasn't prepared for, and depending on what role someone is playing as a volunteer or staff, they can be stretched pretty thin trying to handle everything. That's why a lot of conventions will always ask for more and more volunteers, even while the convention is going on. You simply can't prepare for everything, and the more people that are there to help out, the less of a burden each individual has to work with throughout their time working at a convention. So with all of that in mind, it probably comes to no surprise to you watching that after doing it for the first time this weekend, I highly recommend volunteering some of your time at a future furry convention if you're able to. And yes, I really do mean only some of your time, because even just a couple of hours throughout a weekend can make a tremendous difference. I know I said at the top that I worked 15 hours, and that might seem like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, throughout a 4-day convention, that's barely any time at all. Especially at cons like A&W, where we had a pretty good number of volunteers, you can set your schedule up so you still have time to enjoy the convention itself. For example, I'm a morning person, so I requested that a lot of my shifts be put earlier in the day. That way, I knew I would still be able to help out during the early hours of the day at the con, and would still have time to go to panels, hang out with my friends, and even attend some of the dances in the evenings. Plus, it's not like you're going to be isolated or alone during your shifts. When you're working with a group of people, it's almost inevitable that you'll end up chatting with each other, and that definitely was the case for me as well. I ended up getting to know a few of my fellow volunteers pretty well, and came away from that weekend with some new friends to hang out with at future conventions. And on top of all that, volunteering at a con lands you some pretty sweet benefits as well, some of which can make your overall cost of attending a convention a lot lower than normal. Now, every con compensates their volunteers differently. I know for A&W specifically, if you volunteer 15 or more hours, you have your entire registration costs compensated, so you basically can attend the convention for free. Plus, all the volunteers had access to a hospitality suite that always had snacks and drinks, breakfast in the morning, and fully catered meals every night, which also really cut down on the food costs throughout the weekend convention as well. But even despite all of that, even if I had to pay full price for the con and still had to get food for myself throughout the weekend, I still would have enjoyed my time as a furry convention volunteer just as much. There's just something so fulfilling about giving back to events like these that are put on by a community that you have personally benefited from, and now that I know how much effort it takes to put one on, I feel even more compelled to help out in any way that I can. It's quite literally the least that I could do. So, long story short, furry conventions simply cannot exist without the hard work that the staff and volunteers put in to make it run. And while it is a heck of a lot of work, the fandom means so much to all of us that all of that work is truly a labor of love. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one, but until then, stay wild out there. Peace.